to prevent frost. Shouldn't be as foggy again either, but some clearer skies. Of course, western Scotland, northwest England may well allow a touch of frost here and there. Most of us, though, will start tomorrow about 3 or 4 degrees. A lot of cloud again tomorrow. And northeast England, southeast Scotland and southern parts of Northern Ireland likely to see the bulk of the showers during Sunday. The showers will be of rain, perhaps a little bit of snow on the tops of the hills. Further south, maybe the odd light shower, but much of the south just dry and fairly drab. Some brighter skies in western Scotland. Temperatures, well, if anything, a little lower tomorrow, only 6 or 7 for most of us. The wind will be stronger as well, so it'll feel even colder. And next week, it's staying cold. If anything, turning perhaps a little bit colder with the possibility of some snow showers later in the week. Stay up to date with the forecast.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament.
But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
It is midday. Hello and welcome. I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter across the country, and we have plenty coming up today. We're looking at Sir Keir Starmer's plan to take charitable status away from private schools, and we're looking at charities generally and the role of philanthropy in modern Britain, doing what the state can't or won't do anymore, and often doing it better. Plus another brilliant small business, and going green to save money. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Bethany Elsey.
Alastair, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Bethany Elsey, bringing you up to date from the GB newsroom. Parents are being urged to be vigilant and look out for symptoms of Strep A after 6 children under the age of 10 have died from the infection in the UK. Symptoms are usually mild, but the UK Health Security Agency is now investigating the rise in severe cases. Experts say that a lack of mixing during the COVID-19 pandemic could be behind a drop in immunity. Well, bacteriologist at the University of Aberdeen, Hugh Pennington, says spotting it early is key.
because the disease, this severe manifestation of the disease, is so relatively rare, many doctors won't have seen a case, and they may not have that high index of suspicion. The good news is that treatment is straightforward with penicillin. This is not a bug that's developed antibiotic resistance like so many other bacteria. It's still sensitive to penicillin. The whole issue really is, can you get the penicillin in there quickly enough?
Well, NHS GP Dr. Veena Babu told GB News the symptoms that parents should look out for.
Strep A presents the most commonly in 3 ways. You can get sore throat, you can get scarlet fever, or you could get a condition called impetigo. So scarlet fever presents as muscle aches, fever. You may get a rash on the skin, which feels what we call your typical sandpaper rash. So you might get some bumps coming up on the skin, and that could be on the arms, on the chest, or on the tummy. I would advise parents, what we were saying, look, feel, and how your kids are feeding.
The Immigration Minister has defended the government's handling of migrants crossing the English Channel after more than 44,000 have reached British shores this year. Speaking to GB News, Robert Jenrick acknowledged stopping crossings was the priority for the government, and that it could cost the Conservatives at the next election if numbers weren't reduced. Mr Jenrick said UK and French authorities need to work together.
The Home Secretary signed a deal just a few weeks ago, which is an improvement on the situation, but it isn't the answer. It's certainly not a silver bullet. It does mean that there'll be more French officers on the beaches intercepting boats, but arrests are low, and it doesn't seem to break the people smugglers' business. So we're clearly going to have to go much further than that. Some of that will be diplomatic, and Rishi Sunak seems to have built a good rapport with President Macron, but a lot of it's going to be harder edged than that.
The G7 and Australia have agreed to restrict the amount Russia can be paid for crude oil. The countries say the price cap of $60 a barrel will prevent Moscow from profiting from the energy crisis. On Friday, Russian crude oil was trading at around $67 a barrel, while a senior aide to Ukraine's president says the price should be capped at $30 to hit Russia's economy harder. Thousands of TSSA members are to walk out on the 17th of December in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Services from 6 further train operators are expected to be affected on top of the 2 previously announced. The union says its members feel they're being treated with contempt by train companies and the government, while the Department for Transport has urged unions and rail operators to work together to find a resolution. And in the NHS, neonatal and critical care units are among the services that will be protected from strikes in the build-up to Christmas. The Royal College of Nursing says chemotherapy, dialysis and paediatric intensive care will also not be impacted during planned industrial action on the 15th and 20th of December. Other services, though, will be severely reduced. Matt Hancock has revealed that he was warned that COVID-19 could kill hundreds of thousands of people in the UK 2 months before the country was placed under lockdown. In his new book, the former Health Secretary said the Chief Medical Officer for England, Professor Chris Whitty, told him in January 2020 that in a worst-case scenario, 820,000 people could die. The independent MP for West Suffolk made his first appearance in the House of Commons yesterday after taking part in ITV's I'm a Celebrity show in Australia. A company that makes plastic alternative packaging from seaweed has become the first UK winner of Prince William's Earthshot Prize. Notpla is one of 5 entrepreneurs who've been awarded £1 million to scale up their green innovation projects. The Prince of Wales says the Earthshot solutions prove we can overcome climate change and change our future. In some breaking news, a 3rd man has been charged with murder after 2 teenagers were fatally stabbed in South London last weekend. 18-year-old Hussein Bar has been charged with murder after 2 16-year-old boys were stabbed just a mile apart in southeast London. 2 others, aged 16 and 15, appeared at Bexley Magistrates Court yesterday, charged with murder and were remanded in custody. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. Now, if clipping the wings of the trade unions and privatisation put clear blue water, as the Tory right used to call it, between themselves and Labour, by saying that they will take charitable tax status away from private schools, Labour is putting the clearest of red water between themselves and the Conservatives. Now, in recent history, Labour has always opposed grammar schools for reasons of selection and has long seen private and public schools as bastions of purchasable privilege, enjoying a leg up from the state through tax concessions. They don't levy VAT on fees and they don't pay corporation tax. Now, interestingly, Tony Blair shimmied away from the policy, but Jeremy Corbyn loved it. And now Sir Keir Starmer has resurrected it. It was the subject of one of the more fiery parts of PMQs earlier on this week, which ended up with our ex-private schoolboy Prime Minister accusing Labour of being anti-aspiration.
Speaker, whenever he attacks me about where I went to school, he is attacking the hard-working aspiration of millions of people in this country.
So it is indeed meaty politics. They get those advantages because they are deemed to be charities, with many offering bursaries and scholarships to bright kids whose parents can't, however, afford the full fees. Now, a government spokesperson said, and I quote, "Independent schools have an important role to play in levelling up opportunities for children right across the country by providing targeted bursaries and by working with local state schools to share expertise, best practice and facilities. It is because of the important educational service that the independent schools provide that they are exempt from VAT. So there you have it, the government's position. Now, this is really important and worth remembering. We aren't only talking about the Etons and the Harrows and the Winchester colleges of this great land of ours. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of other schools. There are reasons as to why hundreds and thousands of parents literally scrimp and save to send their children to minor private schools. And indeed, in today's Daily Telegraph, Camilla Tominey says Labour's plan is, and I quote, a stark example of Britain's war on the middle classes. But Sir Keir says it isn't just an attack on privilege. Last September, when Sir Keir pledged to end that charitable status enjoyed by many fee-paying schools, he said it would raise £1.7 billion in tax a year from the private schools, which would then be used to fund state education. Schools would lose their 20% VAT exemption, and they would then have to pay £104 million in business rates as well. 20% tax on fees would mean that tuition at the top institutions could rise by almost £10,000 in some instances, with a £44,000 tuition increasing to nearly £53,000 a year. Now, on that point, the former Tory Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi has warned that this policy would actually flood the state sector with new pupils and would ultimately cost the taxpayer money. He said, and I quote, "I saw some of the analysis done on this, that actually if you do it, you will not increase tax take for the Exchequer." Other Tory MPs have called it a spite measure that would make private schools only affordable to wealthy foreigners and pile further pressure on Britain's state sector. Sir John Redwood, who was in charge of Margaret Thatcher's policy unit, told the Mail, "They are clearly trying to price people out of sending their children to private schools. From the UK, it will become rich foreigners only," he added. "It will therefore greatly increase the burden of public spending because all those people will need full-price state places for free instead of paying for the private sector places themselves. It is a typical vengeful tax to stop people getting on in the world, which ends up costing all of us a lot more money and making many more people miserable." Interestingly, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt isn't impressed either. He took a swipe at the policy during his autumn statement earlier this month, branding it as ideological and claiming it would cause 90,000 pupils to switch to the state schools. But a Labour spokesperson said, "Labour is determined that all children, irrespective of their family income, have the chance to achieve their full potential through high-quality education." So that's our big debate today. with great voices from all sides of the argument. But we really want to hear from you as well. Do you support private schools? Or do you agree, perhaps with Michael Gove, that it's a bastion of privilege that needs to go? One final declaration: 2 of our children were educated privately and 2 of them in the state system. So I have a balanced vested interest in this debate, and I would love to hear from you. You've been busy overnight already sending in your thoughts, and I will read out the best. You can get in touch via gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me direct, or you can tweet at GBNews. Of course, you can also go on Facebook. And as I say, you've been in touch on the big topic already. Starmer's PMQ comments about tax on private schools. Hugh says, my wife and I are emergency service workers, so we just work incredibly hard to find the fees and give our children incredible experiences and in and out of the classroom. The school helped us with sports scholarship for their rugby team, which we were incredibly grateful for. Chris says, I think what irks Labour is the office of scholarships to bright children of less well-off parents. They think that they should stay in the state system. Getting rid of charitable status means that only rich parents can send their children and makes them an easier target to abolish. So that's just a taster. Keep your views coming in and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. We are at GB News. Let's start the conversation with Julie Robinson. Julie is the Chief Executive Officer of the Independent Schools Council, and she's sitting here with me live in the studio, having listened to that introduction. In short, do you feel under attack?
Yes, very much. I mean, we all agree, don't we, that every child deserves the best possible education and parents should have an easy choice of lots of great schools in their local area. Everybody wants that. Everyone can get behind that. But it seems to us that the best way to ensure the best possible overview, the best ecosystem across the UK is not to bash the private sector, but to encourage it to keep doing all the partnerships, providing increasing bursaries, not just for the most academic, by the way, but bursaries for as many children as possible. Build the good work they're doing in setting up state schools, providing extra capacity and specialism across the whole piece.
But that's vital, because it also defines what charitable status implies. And we both know, you more than I, but through our own family experience, we know great private schools that really do open their doors to the state sector. They swap teachers, they swap experiences, playing fields, all sorts of stuff. Not everybody does. And if they don't, then they shouldn't enjoy charitable status.
Absolutely. Independent schools completely accept their civic duty. They know they have a duty to the public to be of general good, and that's why they're doing increasing work. So there are now 7,000 examples of partnership work operating across the 1,400 schools I'm
Do you send out examples
today.
of best practice to your members?
Yes, we collect examples of best practice. We celebrate them each year. We keep track of them all, and we encourage more. In fact, there's a brand new charity launching in January to encourage good impact measurement and to ensure that the kinds of work we're doing has the best possible effect. Because it's a vast array of partnership work that's going on already. And wouldn't it be a terrible shame to harm that rather than to encourage more and more increasing linking together so that we're just part of the overall education package.
Have you also done the crucial sums on which of your members, if they did have to levy VAT and charge their mums and dads 20% more because of it, would go to the wall?
Yes, there's an independent report by Baines Cutler and their financial benchmarking experts.
Is that the one Nadeem Zawi was referring to?
That's the very same one. And they have a lot of information from parent surveys, over 6,000 parents, from actually quite a long time ago, 2018, so before the current cost of living crisis. And they've worked out the drop-off to be something like 100,000 or more pupils. We don't know exactly which schools, because it depends on the pattern of affordability for parents and their own circumstances. But certainly, if you put the cost of something up by 20% all in one go, it's going to price parents out of that market. It's going to mean that not only do you lose the tax take for those parents who are no longer in the independent sector, but they become a cost to the taxpayer.
What would you say was the top single thing that a mum, dad, guardian or a couple of parents get for parting company with what is not an insignificant amount of money to send their son or daughter, or both of them, to a private school. What's your key selling point in defence?
Well, I remember when I was a prep school head myself, parents wanting their child to feel comfortable. Some of them want academic results, but on the whole, I had parents who they perhaps felt they weren't going to quite get what they wanted from the local state offer. They might have wanted extra arts, extra music, extra sport opportunities. They might have been dual income families. They wanted a longer day with all the clubs built into the school day. So they were looking for a broad basis, a child who could be nurtured positively.
Yeah.
Now, this is the same as in the state sector,
Yeah.
so it's not to criticise the state sector.
Oh, no,
at all.
our youngest son went to an absolute standout state school in Alton, Eggers, which is utterly brilliant. Let me put one final question to you, which actually does have a foot in both of your answers there. And that is, it strikes me, reading carefully what Sir Keir has said about it, and looking at the defence coming from a government spokesperson and senior ministers, this is essentially a moral political issue. It's not just about numbers and it's not just about money. And it's Labour's strongest single argument against you and your sector is that you should not be able to purchase advantage and privilege.
And this is where the sector has been characterised wrongly, because it is not the preserve of the super rich. There are plenty, in fact, the majority of parents are working really hard, striving to choose what they feel is the right education for their children. I think to attack people like that, the squeezed middle, if you like, it just doesn't seem logical in the current debate.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we've had you to join our debate on it. I personally think it's an incredibly important issue, and I think it will become a major issue in the general election whenever that comes around. But thank you for being our first guest on that subject. Julie Robinson, CEO of the Independent Schools Council. Thank you. Joining me now is Dr. Zena Hobson. Zena's a former chair of the schools regulator Ofsted. And they are the governing body, the regulators that keep an eye on just the quality of work that is being done in schools right across state sector and privately as well. Zena, do you think that parents are getting value for money in the main from private schools?
I think it's a really mixed bag. And certainly at Ofsted, we only inspect independent schools that wish us to, because there is the Independent Schools Inspectorate Service. And so actually the majority of schools use them. But we still have an overview, and Ofsted actually oversees their inspectorate service. So for me, it's not a question of value for money. And I'll put my cards on the table. I've been a chair of an independent school. My oldest daughter works in one. My kids went to state and independent. It's not that I have, as you said, a moral, political or philosophical view. But I do think that the arguments for ensuring that independent schools retain charitable status are a little flaky at best.
Interesting. Julie Robinson from the Independent Schools Council was just saying that there are some very good examples of what private schools do to defend, as it were, that claim of charitable status and therefore enjoy the tax arrangements that they do, but not all of them. I just wonder if whether or not there are bigger questions for the Charity Commission to be putting to the private schools rather than Ofsted.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the argument that a fee-paying business, which is what it is, should get charitable status because it does some charitable activity, actually just doesn't hold any water. I currently run a charity at the moment, and we get enormous support from the private sector, from companies, everything from construction to luxury goods, really take their social, environmental, governance, what we used to call the sort of CSR piece, really, really seriously. And they give all the time, and yet they pay all their tax, they pay VAT. And so I think the simple argument that, well, independent schools do some stuff for state schools doesn't wash, because so does every other private business, frankly, right now, and probably do as much, if not more, than independent schools.
Julie Robinson, right of reply.
Well, education is for the public good, and there isn't tax on other types of educational offer, like nurseries and university fees, coaching, tuition. So I don't quite understand why independent schools should be any different in that debate. But in terms of their benefit, these are schools who do an immense amount of good. These are schools which are a huge national asset, socially and economically. They do pay tax. They pay over £5 billion worth of tax per year, and then they also save the taxpayer £4.5 billion by educating in the private sector half a million children.
Let me bring Zina back in on that point, because the other educational issue, and that was a very fair exchange and balanced exchange about the charitable status thing, but the other issue is whether or not the state sector, which you and colleagues inspected when you were the chair of Ofsted, could cope with the likely influx of children who are currently being educated in the private sector, whose parents might not be able to afford the fees plus VAT and the rest of it, business rates and so on. Do you think the state system is up to muster to meet that likely demand?
I think it is in certain year groups, and certainly you always see spare capacity when you've got low birth rate years. So I think there is the absolute potential there. But I think we've absolutely got to be clear. We're not talking about getting rid of independent schools. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be treated in the same way as other education establishments might be, like independent nurseries. What we're saying is, do they deserve to have the full charitable status that all other charities are required to meet their obligations? And that's the bit that I'm questioning. I'm not advocating scrapping all independent schools. I suppose one of the things I would say is that we're seeing a huge debate about this, and the House of Commons got really exercised. What I want to see desperately is this government getting as passionate, as exercised and as concerned about what we're doing in state education at the moment, what we're thinking about our curriculum. Because frankly, the curriculum right now is a busted flush. And that's actually, I have to say, in the independent sector as well.
Well, with a former apprenticeship girl as Secretary of State, that may just happen, we shall see. But Zina, and again, Jean, thank you very much indeed for those exchanges. And that was Zina Hobson there, the last voice that you heard, former chair of the Schools Regulator and Inspectorate, Ofsted. Thank you both very much indeed for a great start to our conversation. I'm now joined, last but by no means least in this chunk, by Tom Richmond. Now, Tom's former government advisor in the Department for Education, who worked both with Michael Gove and with Nicky Morgan, who was on the programme a couple of weeks ago. More importantly, though, perhaps, he's also the director of EDSK, which is a think tank that designs new and better ways for policymakers and educators to help every learner succeed, rather what Zina was just saying there at the end, a little more passion perhaps for the state schools as well. Do you see this policy statement by Sir Keir as being essentially about the politics of envy, as the Prime Minister accused him?
Well, that's exactly the point. What I think should be a policy question has become a political question, and I don't think that's very healthy. If you look at the Labour Party's announcement saying that it's going to raise £1.7 billion if they get rid of charitable status and start putting VAT on private school fees, that's fine. But actually, the policy question is how much of that money will sustain over time. And you just heard Julie Robinson talking about the report by the advisory service Baines Cutler a few years ago by saying, well, it might start off with saving 1.7 billion. But once some people start to come back into the state sector, then how much of that 1.7 billion pounds is going to be left? And even if the 1.7 billion pounds sustains, that's probably only about 60 to 70,000 pounds per state school in this country. If you divided the money up across all the state schools, it's about 60 to 70,000 pounds. We have got a major education funding crisis right now. I'm sure head teachers will be very grateful for that money, but it's not going to stop them going to the wall over the next few years in the state sector. It's
and they still haven't even got what they wanted in terms of catch-up post-COVID. But it is a political issue. It is a moral issue as well. And when your old boss, Michael Gove, said that there is something fundamentally wrong with egregious support for private schools, should that not be a big wake-up call? Not for Sir Keir Starmer, he agrees with it, but for the Tory party?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It wasn't just Michael Gove who started to complain about the support for private schools. Theresa May, when she was Prime Minister, if you go back and look at the 2017 Conservative Party manifesto going into the election, it wasn't just Jeremy Corbyn on the Labour side putting forward changes to private schools. Theresa May was saying if private schools do not do more to support state schools, then the government has a right to intervene and potentially question their charitable status. So this really should be a cross-party question. But that's why I worry that it's become more of a political football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually,
well, I need to butt in to underline that because we are in agreement, which is a jolly good thing. And I think that is why both Jean and Zena, former Ofsted boss, was, I think, agreed that maybe there are more questions for the Charity Commission to be putting than perhaps there is for Ofsted to be putting. And Jean was saying there is best practice, and they circulate examples of that, and all private schools aspire to the best.
They do indeed. And so this is why when you look at just about every single newspaper article that's ever written about private schools, it's probably going to have a picture of Eton or Harrow or Winchester College where the Prime Minister went. But as Julie was saying, the sector is actually very, very diverse. About half of private schools are primary schools. And I don't think anybody can accuse those primary schools of ruining our politics or ruining our country over the past 30 or 40 or 50 years in the same way they accuse some of the most prestigious private schools of doing. So unless you take into account that diversity, there's a real risk of unintended consequences if you start trying to financially hurt these schools when some of the schools, not only are primary schools, but some of them support children with disabilities as well. And if they start getting hit by increases in VAT and are not considered charities anymore, I think the Charity Commission could have a very hot potato on their hands because it raises all sorts of questions about, as Julie was saying, what about nurseries? What about university tuition fees that are charging parents as well? Are we going to put VAT on those as well? Very difficult questions.
Absolutely fascinating, and thank you for elegantly and gently correcting me. Of course, it is Julie Robinson. I don't know who Jean is or where she came from, but she snuck into the studio briefly, but there we are. Tom, absolutely fascinating. Great contribution to our debate. Thank you very much indeed, especially the last point there about special education needs, vital, which is actually something that Julie and I were talking about outside before we came in the studio. Thanks, Tom. Keep in touch. Love to talk to you again. You are watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends, including Tom. We have lots more coming up on today's programme, more on that particular debate. And in the last hour, it has been revealed that the sacked Minister Conor Burns has been cleared of misconduct. Plus, Sajid Javid has announced that he will not stand at the next general election, saying being an MP had been the privilege of his life. All of that to come, but first, let's bring you up to date with the weekend weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking cloudy for many with a chilly breeze for some. Let's take a look at the details. The Northern Isles will see this breeze, though it will stay calmer for mainland Scotland. Rain and drizzle will linger across northwest Scotland, with skies remaining grey throughout today. The drizzle may fringe into the far west of Northern Ireland, while a few showers are possible along eastern coastlines during the afternoon. Northwest England has the best chance of seeing some sunny spells this afternoon, and it will remain predominantly dry with highs of around 7 degrees Celsius. A few sunny spells are also possible across Wales, particularly in the far west, but variable amounts of cloud will make for a duller day at times in the east. Cloudier skies will originate from eastern England, where there'll also be some scattered showers. The showers will mainly affect coastal areas, but could push across Lincolnshire into the Midlands. A northeasterly breeze across England and Wales will make it feel chilly this afternoon. Coasts of East Anglia will be particularly exposed to this, making it feel like a low single figures. The breeze will also be present across southern England. It will again be a mostly dry and cloudy day here, though southern counties could largely escape from the showers. Showers will continue across eastern areas into this evening. Meanwhile, the rain across northwest Scotland will gradually clear off. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching GB News. It's 12:33. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories. Parents are being urged to be vigilant and look out for symptoms of Strep A after 6 children under the age of 10 have died from the infection in the UK. Symptoms are usually mild, but the UK Health Security Agency is now investigating the rise in severe cases. Experts say that a lack of mixing during the COVID-19 pandemic could be behind a drop in immunity. Police have charged a third person with murder after 2 teenage boys were fatally stabbed in southeast London last week. 18-year-old Hussein Bar has been charged with murder after 2 16-year-olds were stabbed to death just a mile apart. 2 others, aged 16 and 15, appeared at Bexley Magistrates Court yesterday, charged with murder and were remanded in youth custody. The G7 and Australia have agreed to restrict the amount Russia can be paid for crude oil. The countries say the price cap of $60 a barrel will prevent Moscow from profiting from the energy crisis. On Friday, Russian crude oil was trading at around $67 a barrel. A senior aide to Ukraine's president says the price should be capped at $30 to hit Russia's economy harder. And today marks 30 years since the first ever text message was sent. 1 in 3 people still send and receive SMS messages every day, and 20% of us still use SMS as their default messaging platform. The first text was sent by engineer Neil Papworth in December 1992. It read, "Merry Christmas." You're up to date on TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Alastair.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. Now, a week is a long time in politics. This morning, the sacked minister, Conor Burns, was cleared of the alleged misconduct that he was accused of, and he'll now be readmitted to the Conservative Party. In another Tory headline, as you will have heard in the news earlier on, Sajid Javid has confirmed yesterday that he will not be standing in the next general election, saying that being an MP had, however, been the privilege of his lifetime. Former Chancellor, who's held a number of other senior roles in government and stood for leadership, is the most high-profile Conservative MP to decide to step down at the next election in 2024. And it does, of course, come amid reports that the Conservative Party has told its MPs that they have to decide about their future by Monday, with a number of younger members already confirming their exits, as it were. Well, joining me now to discuss that and more, I'm delighted to say, is GB News political reporter Catherine Forster, and she's here in the studio. I mean, the interesting thing about Connor is its trial by accusation, and it wrecked his political life for a while, and now suddenly, oh, no, there was never anything wrong.
Yes, he says he's had 2 months of absolute hell. What happened was it was Conservative Party conference. Allegedly, he touched a young man's thigh. The person whose thigh he touched did not make the complaint, but somebody else who'd seen it did make the complaint. He was sacked as Trade Minister. He had the Conservative whip withdrawn immediately. An investigation has now cleared him completely. He will get the Conservative whip back. It certainly looks like a massive overreaction from Chief Whip Wendy Morton and Liz Truss, who, of course, was having some problems with discipline in the party at the time. So good news for Connor Burns. But I think they were very keen to have a policy of zero tolerance for sexual wrongdoing. They've obviously got it wrong in this instance. But now, again, in the last couple of days, there's allegations that a Conservative MP is still walking around Parliament with the whip intact, accused of various sexual misconduct, including rape. So we shall wait and see what happens.
We shall indeed. All very troubling indeed. Were you as surprised as me at Sajiv's decision? And as I said in that intro a little bit earlier on, one of the most high-profile Tory MPs saying, no, I don't fancy this. Do you suppose that that was slightly nudged along by the Chester by-election result?
Well, possibly, but it had been rumoured for a while that he might stand down at the next election, although his team had denied that, had said that he'd already put his papers in, because Monday is the day that CCHQ have asked Conservative MPs to confirm if they're going to stand or not, linked to boundary changes, and obviously they want to have plenty of time before the next election. So not entirely surprising, but a big loss for the Conservative Party. I mean, he is a big beast. He's been, he's got a majority of 23,000 in Bromsgrove. He's been MP since 2010. He's had all sorts of big cabinet positions, including Chancellor. And of course, if he hadn't resigned as Chancellor just before the pandemic, when Number 10 made a power grab, basically, and he said, no, I'm not having this, and he stood down, that, of course, paved the way for Rishi Sunak to come in as Chancellor, the furlough scheme and everything that has gone through that. So I think it will be a blow for Rishi Sunak, although Sajid Javid did not endorse him for the leadership. He endorsed Liz Truss, and that must have grated.
Intriguing stuff, Catherine. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. That is Catherine Forster there, GB News political reporter. Now, Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner said that Rishi Sunak has failed his first electoral test following her party's record by-election win in Chester, following former Chancellor Sajid Javid's announcement that he is stepping down in the next general election. So is it the beginning of the end of a Conservative government? Well, Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr, Khalid Mahmood, joins me live now down the line. And there he is, good friend of ours on this programme. Always good to see you. The Chester numbers, I think, show that if there were a general election tomorrow, which of course there won't be, that you'd have a majority, but it would be relatively slender compared to some of the headlines that we have endured. Have Labour got to get a bit more realistic and a bit more objective about these results?
Well, I think we are. And I think this policy that we have to move along and to deliver for the country is what the people are seeing, and that's why we had the results that we had in Chester. And I think we are determined to stay at that. We're determined to stay on top of it. We are determined with Sir Keir Starmer in the lead and Rachel Reeves as the Shadow Chancellor, who's making real competent decisions about the economy. Of course, we haven't got the full full book yet at the moment in terms of what the spend is. But when we get that, we'll give far more details on that as well. But we got clear policies on our energy. We got clear policies on the environment, in manufacturing and engineering. So all of those issues are now clear and where we want to move forward.
Khaled, you've also got a very clear policy now on education, which is to take charitable status and those tax advantages that result from it away from private schools. That's our big discussion today. In your view, and you've been around a while, is this an attempt by Sir Keir to say, look, there really is a lot more than a postage stamp between us and the Tories, which is one of the most brutal charges made of him? And by the way, here's a bit of red meat to distinguish us from the blue Tories.
Well, no, I think clearly what Sir Keir is trying to do is that £70,000 in a school is a lot of money. And I think you give the £70,000 to a head teacher, they'll be very pleased with that. And they can really put some resources in to support young people who are coming through. We've got a lot of people at the moment that are being excluded from schools. So that sort of money would really help people back into education and support them. And that's why Sir Keir is doing that.
But what would Sir Keir do, and Bridget, about those state schools that you've just said need help, and several of my other guests admitted and agreed with that as well, that suddenly have to take on board quite a lot of boys and girls who were at minor private schools, but mums, dads and guardians can't afford the fees at 20% higher? Is the state system up to picking up that slack?
Well, look, the state system's there to pick up all the slack, at both ends. At the bottom end, which is what we're trying to do to make sure that the bottom is raised above. And that's what we've got to do as responsible politicians running the country, is that we're going to keep raising the bottom up and make sure that more people come in and make sure that people have a better education so people don't need to pay huge amounts of money to go to private education. That's what our objective is and always has been.
Do you reckon it's going to be a class-driven, spiteful, envy-driven election?
No, absolutely not. I think this is about giving opportunities to people, looking at manufacturing and industry back, what Sir Keir is doing in terms of getting more of that industry in, privatising the energy sector to giving more to the people, improving the education sector. So, no, I don't think Sir Keir is into...
I'm very relieved to hear that. We shall watch with interest. Khaled, I said it at the top, I repeat it now on the way out. It's always a pleasure to have you on the programme. Thanks for fitting us into your busy Saturday, and keep in touch. Thanks. That's Labour MP for Birmingham Peribau, Khaled Mahmood. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including It's Small Business Saturday, and former Strictly star Christina Rianoff will join me to discuss her experiences running a small business with her partner Ben Cohen. But first, a quick break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:45. You're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. Today is due to be the 5th biggest shopping day of the year, a campaign that highlights small business success and encourages consumers to shop local and support small businesses in their communities. And to mark the day, Business Secretary Grant Shapps launches a payment review, as he says that the UK's smallest firms are currently owed more than £23 billion. Wow. We've had a terrific run recently on this programme with small businesses, and to celebrate small businesses and to discuss the situation, I am joined now by professional dancer and owner of Sue Yoga, Christina Rihanov. Krista there she is, perhaps best known for being a professional dancer on BBC's Strictly Come Dancing, but goodness me, she is a small business person with her partner as well. You told us that you and Ben opened the business centre, Sue Yoga, in Northampton in June 2019, 9 months before the pandemic. Needless to say, if you had a crystal ball, you'd probably do things quite differently. What would you have done differently, and would you do if it was now?
No, I would have done a lot of things completely different. I went into it with an open heart and willingness to perhaps create something very different and very special for my community here. And because I was a young mom with a little baby, and it was really hard to go to any classes to look after my own well-being or fitness. And I wanted to create a center where it welcomes everybody, regardless of age, regardless of ability, disability, and especially for moms, because even now I'm talking to you from a crash. You know, we have a crash facilities in our yoga, so the moms can leave the babies with the crash work and go to classes. But, you know, we went big, we took quite large premises. And of course, you know, it was just, an idea to create something really special for everyone here. But, you know, we didn't see the pandemic coming like any other small business probably would say that I would have done things differently. I would have went smaller.
We've got Grant Shapps today standing up in defence of your sector and saying that some small businesses are owed a great deal of money, and that is always a problem. Of course it is. But did you feel that you got adequate support either from central government or local government when you were trying to get this business up and running?
No, I haven't felt that at all, and I still don't feel it, because our West Northamptonshire Council is not really there to even support us now when electricity prices literally doubled up, and there is no break on the small businesses for like a business rates or anything like that. There is no business plan which allow you to foresee and actually kind of allocate something for this kind of situation where you literally go from, I don't know, £3,000 a month to £6,000 a month for electricity bills. And I've asked local council to help. Mind you, we give back so much. We do free classes for cancer patients. We do kids performances for elderly and all these kind of things. But they're like, no, there is nothing in place, and there is basically no help, and here you are, and here's your bill. And if you don't pay it on time, we're going to send you like court proceedings and the rest of it. And it's really upsetting because we're just trying our best to keep the business afloat. Yes. And we're providing something very important for the local community. You know, it's a mental health issue now where people are really struggling. They need to get out of the house. They need to have some form of release, you know, go to fitness, go to yoga, go to meditation classes. But people see now even a membership at places like ours as a luxury because they feel like, oh, I can't afford yoga classes because I just can't like pay like £49 a month.
Sure.
And I think
but
it's
the flip side to that, and I do understand it, is that what you are offering is very much in vogue at the moment. We are told to look after ourselves. We're told to be careful about our mental well-being and so on. The services that you are offering, if they go well for me, my partner, my wife or whomsoever, ultimately that's going to save the NHS money because we can, off our own bats, keep ourselves fitter, both mentally and physically.
Absolutely, 100%. But somehow that whole circle of understanding what actually we provide is not really there for the public knowledge or even for the government. I think for people it's essential to have some time to themselves, to come to a facility like ours, to have a yoga or fitness class or whatever it is, for young moms to have a time for themselves. But unfortunately, it's now, they see it as a luxury, and it's really sad because people are going to be locked down at home and feel really sad and very down and depressed, and rather to come here and feel part of the community, they'll just be left alone. And it's extremely sad for me as someone who's trying to really put it out there and say, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to look after your well-being. And the yoga class can do so much more for you than taking a medication for depression or something like that.
You've answered half of this question in saying that your biggest pressure in terms of inflows is people looking at their memberships and thinking, oh, I've got to scrimp and save because we're all going to get through higher electricity bills and higher mortgages and so on. What's your biggest cost pressure?
Our biggest cost pressure, I would say, is electricity, 100%, and of course business rates, which is piling upon us, and it's what it is.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen because there is no plan. There is no plan to help small businesses. We're going forward and back with the government. What's going to be? Is there a cap? Is there a help? Is there not a help? What's going to happen with those electricity prices? Nobody really can give an answer. And we, therefore, cannot plan forwards and see if we can survive this.
Well, I wonder, maybe Grant Shapps should take a closer look at those costs that he can influence in one way or another, rather than banging on about how much money small businesses are owed. But we'll pass that message on. Christina, great talking to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, not only because it's great to hear wisdom from the front line, but also for such a balanced and sensible take on the pressures that so many small businesses are facing, and the brilliant offer that you have to people there to help keep themselves mentally and physically fit. Best to both of you, and thanks for breaking into your weekend to talk to us. Christina Ryanov there. Now, winter is here, as you may have noticed, and temperatures, of course, are starting to plummet. People across the United Kingdom will be feeling the chill in their homes, but not as much as our country's homeless whilst living on the streets. Take One, Leave One is a brilliant initiative that we've covered before on the programme, and I'm very happy to revisit today because it's an initiative offering help to homeless people and those who are facing winter hardship simply by being chilly. So they set up clothing rails in 4 cities, and if you've got a spare coat, you put it there, and someone who has no coat at all takes it away. The founding father and good friend of this programme is Stefan Simanovic, and he called the firm Take One and Leave One, and there he is now to tell us more. Demand, I fear, is outstripping supply.
Sadly, yes, always. Take One, Leave One rails, originally we set them up that very cold winter, the beast of the east was coming. We put one outside the office where I work in central London. Just a very simple sign saying, if you're cold, take one. If you can help, leave one. It filled up with clothes. We were meant to be there for 2 weeks in the run-up for Christmas. We stayed for 3 months, and we've been back every year. And we've spread not just to 4 cities, but across the country. Over 150 rails have been set up. We always pop up at this time of year just before Christmas, because that's the time people think about goodwill and helping others. But we do it all year round. So some of the rails, like the Brighton one, like the one in Vauxhall, go all year round. And we've actually shifted it. So some of the signs in this, when it's not with the winter months, say, if you need help, take one. If you can help, leave one. So it's for anyone who is feeling the pinch, whether it's because of the cost of living crisis. But originally it was, as you said, set up for rough sleepers and homeless people.
Yeah. Interesting. We were running pictures while you were giving that answer, and I was going to ask you how far it had expanded, and you said in 4 other city centres, because I remember you and I talking about that last time you were on, the ambition, because demand was such that you wanted to roll it out wider. But on those rails outside, I don't know if it was outside the original, your office, or one of the other centres, there were lots of coats, but there were also sweaters, there were cardigans, there were other items of clothing. Was that your decision to, as it were, broaden the offer, or was it folks saying, do you know what I really need? It's not a coat, it's X?
Well, this is actually the Brighton rail that you're seeing there. This is with stickers rather than actually banners, but we can send you one of these wherever you are. The decision to what we hang there is up to the people who run the rails. Take One, Leave One isn't an organisation. It's not a charity. It's an idea. So anyone can do that. This is the beauty of this idea. You could do this right now. Take some warm clothes from your loft, put them outside your house, find a city centre, somewhere dry, warm, keep the shopkeepers happy about it. But just get permission. So the concept is that anything could be there. Like some of the stalls have food and drinks and coffee. But warm clothes, as I say, in the summer, people still need clothing. So some of these things can go all year round. So the concept is an idea which can be expanded. It can be taken. Anyone can do this. Come to us. We'll send you a banner for free, or set one up yourself.
It's very much a communities thing as well, and we were exchanging messages with each other earlier in the week about local heroes and your involvement in that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, a company called Belvita just chose Take One, Leave One as one of their organisations that is a local hero. So it's very much a community-led grassroots thing that anyone can do. The thing is, we ask people to use the hashtag Tolo and then the city. So Tolo Brighton, Tolo Peckham, Tolo Watford, wherever you are, you can set up your own Take One, Leave One. And then people can find each other by using that hashtag on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, and find other people who are willing to help. One of the ideas, as you said, to expand it, and we did this last year, we went to the heads of all the big charities, particularly the homeless charities, and I know you yourself were an ambassador for shelter, but we went to them and said, why don't the charity shops put a rail outside each of their shops just for homeless people with warm clothes each winter? And this could make sure that we have a Take One, Leave One rail on every high street in the country. Now, we're still waiting for a clear response from these charities. I know these things can take time, but I think this idea, a very simple idea of making sure, because if you're homeless and you need to get a warm coat and you go into a charity shop, you have to pay 20, 30 pounds. Now, the idea is having a surplus, having a place where you keep the clothes, having somewhere where you could put the rail in and out, having some volunteers to help. Charity shops have all that. So that's one of the calls that we're still hoping to announce. We're doing our big press launch on the 9th of December. So if anyone wants to come down, I say it's a celebrity launch. We've had Boy George, we've had Gary Lineker, we've had Guy Pratt from Pink Floyd came down to our Brighton launch last year. So, yeah, anyone who wants to get involved...
All right, Simon, we've got to leave it there, but I wish you well, as you know, and keep in touch and keep me across that. And I'm glad Pink Floyd were involved. David Gilmour, terrific supporter of Crisis and has been for a long, long time. Good luck with what you're doing. It's a terrific idea. And fingers crossed that you get good news on that front as well. That's Stefan Simanovic, the founder of Take One, Leave One. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends, with more to come on the programme this afternoon. Health officials are investigating the condition Strep A after 6 children have now died from the bacterial infection. We'll be speaking to a doctor in the next hour to tell us what symptoms we need to look out for if we have little people in our homes. But first, we're going to take a quick break.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
It's 1 minute past one. Hello and welcome if you've just joined us. Hello and thank you so much for being there if you've been with us since 12 o'clock. This is Alastair Stewart and friends, and we're into our second hour of the programme this afternoon. I'll be keeping you company on television and radio with plenty more still to come, including more on that top lively discussion on our education system after Sir Keir Starmer hit out at the Prime Minister in this week's PMQs over private schools and charitable status. Plus, how can we stay warm on a budget in this week's Saturday Savings? But first, let's bring you right up to date with all the rest of the day's news. Here's Bethany Elsey.
Alastair, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past one. I am Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. Parents are being urged to be vigilant and look out for symptoms of Strep A after 6 children under the age of 10 have died from the infection in the UK. Symptoms are usually mild, but the UK Health Security Agency is now investigating the rise in severe cases. Experts say that a lack of mixing during the COVID-19 pandemic could be behind a drop in immunity. Bacteriologist at the University of Aberdeen, Hugh Pennington, says spotting it early is key.
Because the disease, this severe manifestation of the disease, is so relatively rare, many doctors won't have seen a case, and they may not have that high index of suspicion. The good news is that treatment is straightforward with penicillin. This is not a bug that's developed antibiotic resistance like so many other bacteria. It's still sensitive to penicillin. The whole issue really is, can you get the penicillin in there quickly enough?
Well, NHS GP Dr. Veena Babu told GB News the symptoms that parents should look out for.
Strep A presents the most commonly in 3 ways. You can get a sore throat, you can get scarlet fever, or you could get a condition called impetigo. So scarlet fever presents as muscle aches, fever. You may get a rash on the skin, which feels what we call your typical sandpaper rash. So you might get some bumps coming up on the skin, and that could be on the arms, on the chest, or on the tummy. I would advise parents, what we were saying, look, feel, and how your kids are feeding.
In other news, the Immigration Minister has defended the government's handling of migrants crossing the English Channel after more than 44,000 have reached British shores this year. Speaking to GB News, Robert Jenrick said stopping migrant crossings is a priority for the government. He also admitted it could cost the Conservatives at the next election if numbers aren't reduced. Mr Jenrick said UK and French authorities need to work together.
The Home Secretary signed a deal just a few weeks ago, which is an improvement on the situation, but it isn't the answer. It's certainly not a silver bullet. It does mean that there'll be more French officers on the beaches intercepting boats, but arrests are low, and it doesn't seem to break the people smugglers' business. So we're clearly going to have to go much further than that. Some of that will be diplomatic, and Rishi Sunak seems to have built a good rapport with President Macron, but a lot of it's going to be harder edged than that.
A wealthy Russian businessman has been arrested in a major operation by the UK's National Crime Agency. The 58-year-old was arrested at his multi-million-pound residence in London by a specialist unit investigating oligarchs. He was detained on suspicion of money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the Home Office and conspiracy to commit perjury. 2 other men were also arrested in connection with the money laundering. All 3 men have since been released on bail. The EU, G7 and Australia have agreed a price cap on Russian oil in an effort to stop Moscow profiting from the energy crisis. The limit is $60 a barrel, and on Friday, Russian crude oil was trading at around $67 a barrel. A senior aide to Ukraine's president says the price should be capped at $30 to hit Russia's economy harder. Police have charged a 3rd person with murder after 2 teenage boys were fatally stabbed in southeast London last weekend. 18-year-old Hussein Bar has been charged with murder after 2 16-year-olds were stabbed to death just a mile apart. 2 others, aged 16 and 15, appeared at Bexley Magistrates Court yesterday, charged with murder, and they were remanded in youth custody. Thousands of TSSA members are to walk out on the 17th of December in a dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Services from 6 further train operators are expected to be affected on top of the 2 previously announced. The union says its members feel they're being treated with contempt by train companies and the government. The Department for Transport has urged unions and rail operators to work together to find a resolution. And in the NHS, neonatal and critical care units are among the services that will be protected from strikes in the build-up to Christmas. The Royal College of Nursing says chemotherapy, dialysis and paediatric intensive care will also not be impacted during planned industrial action on the 15th and 20th of December. Other services, though, will be severely reduced. And a company that makes plastic alternative packaging from seaweed has become the first UK winner of Prince William's Earthshot Prize. Notpla is one of 5 entrepreneurs who've been awarded £1 million to scale up their green innovation projects. The Prince of Wales says that Earthshot solutions prove we can overcome climate change and change our future. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Alastair.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. This week, opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer hit out at Rishi Sunak in PMQs over private school taxation. Former grammar school attendee Sir Keir Starmer called for an end to the charitable status enjoyed by private schools and said that this may lead to wider economic divisions. Some may argue that grammar schools pose a similar problem. Now, we've spoken about this at some length so far in the programme. Let's continue that conversation, and I'm delighted to be joined now by Jonathan Gullis MP, and he's Conservative Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent, and importantly is former Minister for School Standards and indeed a former teacher. What are the attack lines against Sir Keir Starmer's proposition, which many people are saying is a statement of the blindingly obvious?
Well, thank you, Alastair, for the opportunity to come on. I think for me, it's about parental choice and allowing and accepting the fact that some parents, a lot of parents, middle-income earners who choose not to buy a new house, choose not to have an extension on their home, choose not to get the new car, choose not to go on holiday every year, but choose instead to use all their disposable income to send their children to private school is their right and their choice. And it's not for the state to tell them what they can and can't have. And we seem to have fallen into this trap under the Labour Party, where they like to ban grammar schools because of ideology. They obviously voted in 2019 to abolish private schools, and now Keir Starmer's trying to do this through the back door by not allowing it. Yet, they themselves are allowed to attend them. So it's okay for them, but not for everyone else in places like Stoke-on-Trent, who may one day aspire, if they can, to send their children to such schools.
I wonder if you agree with this, though, and interestingly enough, the woman who was on earlier on, who speaks for the private sector, was saying on the charitable status element, there are quite a lot of private schools out there, not the great Eatons and Winchesters and Harrows, but ordinary middle-ranking ones who really could do a lot more on charitable work, whether it's bursaries or whether it's cooperating and working with the local state schools there as well. Do you agree with that?
So I agree in part, yes. I mean, if I give you an example, where I grew up, Warwick School and King's High School in Warwick and Leamington constituency, a Labour-held constituency, work with their local state schools to actually get students who want to apply to your Oxford, your Cambridge and others through the interview process, the application process and the assessment process. That's the kind of responsible work that we should be seeing. It's also Nadeem Zahawi, when he was the Children and Families Minister, who introduced the scheme where we saw certain private schools sign up to take children who are in care and allow them to become full-time boarders and cover the cost of those fees, which is another great example of what the private school sector can and should be doing. But of course, there'll always be some who aren't pulling their weight enough. And I don't think that we should have any shame in calling that out. But I think it's important to remember that the overwhelming majority do a good job and allow their facilities, for example, particularly sporting facilities, to be used all year round.
Former boss of Ofsted said on the programme as well that she would like to hear more celebration of what state schools do achieve, because there are undoubtedly some really superb, top-drawer state schools out there. And as I said in my introduction, you're a former teacher. With Gillian Keegan there at the helm, a former apprenticeship girl, do you think that is more likely to happen in the run-up to the election?
I think personally that this Conservative government since 2010 has been extremely supportive of state schools and been doing all it can to really drag them up to be competitive in order to be the best that it is, to make sure that no matter where you live in this country, there's not a postcode lottery. Now, personally, I would like to see the ban on grammar schools lifted. I'm someone who believes that we should allow parents to have a choice in local communities to choose. And I certainly want to see private schools continue to offer more bursaries and opportunities. But there are so many brilliant state schools. And let's look at Michaela, this school that Labour rallied against because they were going for a firm approach, a knowledge-based rich curriculum, which are producing some of the most outstanding results we've ever seen. In fact, outstretching the results that we see in some of our private schools and grammar schools. That's an example where you've got a strong head teacher with a strong ethos, but strict behaviour management and a passion for imparting knowledge into pupils that shows that, if those state schools can all lift themselves in that direction and we celebrate those ones and help them on that journey, those who wish to get there, then they can be achieved. But I think it's really important to remember, Alastair, that Labour's plans is based on ideology. If just 10% of projected pupils left the private sector because obviously the cost became too much for their parents, that's on average, we reckon, 60,000 pupils. Where are those school places going to be? There'll also be some major pressures in some geographical areas where those private schools are more clustered than others. When Labour are already talking about classrooms of sizes of 30, entering 60,000 pupils into the state-funded programme without the funding to build extra capacity in schools, without the capacity of lack of free schools, which Labour have opposed in the past, I think this is a real concern. So it's a policy based on ideology, but not based on actual reality.
I've got your message loud and clear on what the government should be saying and celebrating about the state system. A lot of our viewers and listeners have also been emailing in and tweeting that they would like to see the return of the assisted places scheme, so that the government helps, if your choice is to get your child educated in a private school because you don't think the state school is as good as some of them are. Do you see any prospects at all of that returning?
I don't know if we will, Alastair, but what we do know is, as I say, that there is a scheme in place run by the Department for Education for particularly the most vulnerable children in our society, children who are looked after, to be able to access private schools and they have their fees paid for by those private schools. I think we should be doing all we can to get that sector together around the table to put more of that money into this scheme and make sure they're delivering on that to get more of those children in care, the education they deserve and the opportunities they deserve, because through no fault of their own, they find themselves obviously in a much more precarious place than others. But I do think that actually what we should be focusing on, as I say, is getting free schools absolutely out and about, getting the best multi-academy trusts spread more evenly across our country, and lifting the ban on grammar schools so that if local areas want to have that selective education because of their child's academics, let's not forget we would have selective education by faith, by the ability to sing, by the ability to act, by the ability to play a musical instrument. Why not for academics as well? For me, this is just common sense. But I really hope we turbocharge free schools. I think that's the solution.
OK. Final point is, I wonder whether or not people like Sajid Javid and many other colleagues who've decided not to face the electorate next time up looked at the Chester results and saw the way in which, OK, only in Chester, but perhaps the opinion polls suggest it's more widespread, that the tide has actually turned. Here we are having a row about elitism and about selection and about the rest of it. A lot of your colleagues have said this is an argument we can't win, therefore we're not even going to go into the battle.
Well, Alastair, I'm here on your show ready to do battle. I can't wait to get into the trenches with Labour. It'll be street by street, door by door. I'm going to see them, and I'm going to remind the people of Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk that it's a Conservative-led council since 2019, a Conservative government that brought 56 million from the Levelling Up Fund, 500 brand new Home Office jobs, 17.6 million Kidsgrove Town deal, 31 million pounds to improve our local bus services and road infrastructure, and obviously create and reopen things like the Kidsgrove Sports Centre that Labour closed because they couldn't be bothered to spend a single pound coin to save it back in 2017. I know that we've been getting that money. We've been delivering those projects as well, not as quickly as we want. Of course, inflation and obviously COVID has had an impact on the speed of delivery. But I can't begin to believe that Labour, who ran places like Stoke-on-Trent for 70 years, have anyone's interest locally here. You know, this is a Labour Party that's bedded in North London, that still has a North London view. They talk tough on immigration, but we all know that Keir Starmer wants to defend free movement. He said it himself. We know that and Lisa Nandy still wants to defend it today. We know that they want to talk about levelling up, but they didn't mention it until a Conservative government got elected. We know they've suddenly found Stoke-on-Trent because Google Maps has helped them find where it is rather than actually understand where it is and spend time there. I can't wait to do battle, and I'll be on your show, on other shows, and in the House of Commons and in the doorsteps of people around our country saying why Labour is not the answer to the problem.
Jonathan, you're always welcome on this programme, or indeed any of the other programmes on GB News, and thank you for breaking into your weekend to talk to us about schools as well. There we have it. Jonathan Gullis, Conservative Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent, or as the Rolling Stones might describe him, street-fighting man, looking forward to the election. Now, staying with our big story, the education debate, I'm delighted to say that joining us is another good friend, Chris McGovern, who's the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, who's also taught in both sectors, importantly, and attended secondary and modern school and a grammar school. Great to see you. Do you think the Conservative Party are missing a few tricks, as I think Jonathan Gullis just demonstrated, that there is a stronger case to be made for choice and the quality that the private sector offers, but also there's much in the state sector that can be trumpeted to its pride? Are they just not playing this argument terribly well?
I think that's an understatement. I think they're hopeless. Look, Jonathan spoke very eloquently. You yourself pointed out as well. There are many great state schools, many excellent state schools, but you forgot to say something which is rather important. In order to get into those excellent state schools, you need a pocket full of money. You need loads of money because you need to buy a house in the catchment area. And the Social Mobility Unit a few years ago showed that if you live in a poor area of the country, you're 27 times more likely to go to a poor school. So we do indeed have to pay for our education in the state sector. Most children in the country go to state schools, and if you've got a lot of money, you can buy a house in a good area. So it's hypocrisy what Labour is saying, and it's hopelessness what the Tories are doing. They need to be far more robust. The private schools are a jewel in the crown. We need to preserve the good, and we need to renovate the bad. So we need to focus on improving state schools and not being so, what can I say, defensive about private schools. Private schools are excellent, and if we close them down because they can't afford to stay open because they lose their charitable status, all that will happen is that the rich kids will continue to go to Eton and Cheltenham Ladies College and these posh schools, and the poorer, but just about scrimping and saving parents, well, they will have to leave and go to the state sector. That's no way out. The way forward is to raise the standard in state schools, but particularly in the schools in poor areas. And the simple solution, we need to bring back hundreds of grammar schools. If we had kept grammar schools, most private schools would have withered on the vine. So this government is hopeless. They need to be much more robust. And the Labour Party are incredibly hypocritical. That's where I stand, Alastair. Is that robust enough for you?
I think it was wonderfully robust and stuck alongside Jonathan Gullis's analysis. I think really will help our viewers understand why many of them have tweeted to us in the way that they have. Let me just try one other thing with you as well, though, nodding to previous guests who said, that the charitable status is a tax decision, but you've got to earn that charitable status. And even the woman who runs the independent sector said on this programme, there are some exemplars of the best possible practice to earn and warrant that charitable status. There are others who, frankly, could get their fingers out and do a little more.
Yes, I mean, there, of course, private schools which have got great facilities should be supporting state schools. I look to the future, though, when we see it the other way around, when state schools can support private schools. Because some parents go to private schools, not because they are posh and lots of money, but because their children have special needs and so forth. Yeah, it's a two-way thing. And of course we expect the private sector to support the state sector. But the best way the state sector can benefit, the main way they can benefit, is to start copying some of the things which go on in the best private schools. Private schools are a great success. I often go on about the success of the school system in Singapore, Shanghai, Tokyo, and so on. But what you find out if you go to Singapore and Shanghai is the richest of the rich in Shanghai are sending their kids to London or to Britain to the best private schools because they know our best private schools are the best in the world.
Absolutely.
So we've got to protect them. They also produced our Olympic team as well. We've got to raise the standard.
I've got to move it on, Chris, but I was just going to point out as well that one of my best friends in the education world runs a school called Harrow Hong Kong, and the Chinese have purchased, not Harrow, but they've purchased the right to produce education equivalent to that out there, and it's hugely successful. Message received loud and clear, Chris, always very strong and great to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed, Chris McGovern there, Campaign for Real Education, and let's have more grammar schools and let's defend choice. That's his position. Joining me now, I'm delighted to say, is another old friend of mine, Steve Chalk, who's the chief of the Oasis Academy Trust, and there he is. Great to see you. Interestingly, just a moment ago, Jonathan Gullis, the Tory MP, was saying, in many respects, your sector is the answer because the academies began as a result of generous individuals who had lots of money helping set them up, and they had a foot, therefore, in the private sector. But now Jonathan was saying the absolute backbone of a brilliant secondary system that this Tory government needs to celebrate more.
Well, I agree with that. I began Oasis Schools. We run 52 schools now. They're all in poor communities. Actually, agreeing with what Chris was just saying, we have partnerships with some independent school groups, and we put back some of our expertise. But the truth is, I think that rather than losing the independent sector, what we need, I'd say, Alastair, is a real reformation, genuine reform of the way that these partnerships work with lots more accountability. I think it would be brilliant if an incoming government set up a framework. If independent schools are going to stay as charities, all charities have to exist, as you know, for the public good and have to be exclusively charitable. So we can't lock those resources into the independent sector. They need to get out into the poor communities that Jonathan was talking about much more than they are at the moment, and they're not getting out.
Do you think that Labour, therefore, under the current leadership, is unwise to make this such a vitriolic issue? Because I can remember having lunch years ago with Steve Byers, a chap we both knew, we both remember from the Blairite era, who was a schools minister, and he was desperately keen to do exactly what you've just said and Jonathan Gullis said a moment ago, and that is to try and bolt together the very best of the private sector with the very best of the state sector. Starmer's language is about envy.
Yeah. Well, when academies were first set up, Andrew Adonis, now Lord Adonis, was the schools minister that brought it about. And one of Andrew's big pushes was to create this join-up, this networking, this working together and partnership. It was partly successful, but here's the problem. You know, people in the independent sector will tell you that they give lots of bursaries. I think it's about 40,000 a year, actually. They give bursaries to kids out of poor communities. But what that does, actually, is it lifts the child out of the community and often has really alienating impacts for them in their family and their social context. So they don't feel part of this new elite, and they don't feel part of where they came from. Rather than lifting kids out, what we need is a robust system that works with schools in the poorest communities much more robustly. And there are ways in which that happens, but it's not happening enough.
No, I agree. This is great that there's agreement on some of the more contentious points. Let me put one other thing to you, and with your school manager hat on and Oasis manager hat on very, very clearly. How concerned are you as a professional educator that if Labour are successful on this measure and the tax status does change, those fees go up by 20, 25%, whatever it might be, that the existing state sector, including the academies, can cope with what will be the inevitable flow of boys and girls from private schools come knocking on your door or the local comprehensive?
Yeah, well, the one thing I didn't agree at all with Jonathan about, I think he's living on a different planet, is that this current government is funding the state sector adequately. Since 2010, as I'm sure you know, Alastair, the money has been draining away from the state sector. It's unrecognisable to what it was a decade ago. There are few classroom assistants. We aren't able to give the personalised care that we once could. Schools are running on empty, as you know, state sector schools. So at current, agreeing with what you say, we couldn't cope with that influx. So, 40% of young professionals going into teaching in state sector schools currently leave within the first 5 years because they go in to serve kids and nurture kids and they get weighed down and they can't survive. They're leaving all the time. We've got to do a lot more for our state sector schools, and that's why the independent sector, if it's made properly accountable, can be part of that answer. We're not levelling up. That's the point. You know, Jonathan talked about levelling up. I don't know where he lives, but it's not happening in any
Stoke-on-Trent, Steve. But there we are. Always a joy to talk to you and always a joy to hear areas of agreement and areas of disagreement so eloquently expressed. Steve Chalk, thank you so much and have a great weekend. Lovely to talk to you. Steve Chalk there, Chief Executive of the Oasis Academy Trust. It does what it says on the T-shirt that he was wearing. There we go. The time is now 27 minutes past 1. We've got a little over half an hour still to go, with plenty more to come on Alastair Stewart and Friends after the break. There's been an alarming rise in Strep A cases, and experts are investigating after 6 primary school children have died. I'll be joined by a doctor who can tell parents the signs to look out for. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather prospects this weekend.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking cloudy for many with a chilly breeze for some. Let's take a look at the details. The Northern Isles will see this breeze, though it will stay calmer for mainland Scotland. Rain and drizzle will linger across northwest Scotland, with skies remaining grey throughout today. The drizzle may fringe into the far west of Northern Ireland, while a few showers are possible along eastern coastlines during the afternoon. Northwest England has the best chance of seeing some sunny spells this afternoon, and it will remain predominantly dry with highs of around 7 degrees Celsius. A few sunny spells are also possible across Wales, particularly in the far west, but variable amounts of cloud will make for a duller day at times in the east. Cloudier skies will originate from eastern England, where there'll also be some scattered showers. The showers will mainly affect coastal areas, but could push across Lincolnshire into the Midlands. A northeasterly breeze across England and Wales will make it feel chilly this afternoon. Coasts of East Anglia will be particularly exposed to this, making it feel like a low single figures. The breeze will also be present across southern England. It will again be a mostly dry and cloudy day here, though southern counties could largely escape from the showers. Showers will continue across eastern areas into this evening. Meanwhile, the rain across northwest Scotland will gradually clear off. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back. You're watching GB News. It's 1:31. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories. Parents are being urged to be vigilant and look out for symptoms of Strep A after 6 children under the age of 10 have died from the infection in the UK. Symptoms are usually mild, but the UK Health Security Agency is now investigating a rise in severe cases. Experts say that a lack of mixing during the COVID-19 pandemic could be behind a drop in immunity. A wealthy Russian businessman has been arrested on suspicion of money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the Home Office and conspiracy to commit perjury. The 58-year-old was arrested at his multi-million-pound home in London by a specialist police unit investigating oligarchs. 2 other men were also arrested in connection with the money laundering. All 3 have since been released on bail. In a tweet responding to the arrest, Security Minister Tom Tugendhat said, "We will defend our democracy and hunt the Kremlin's criminals." Police have charged a 3rd person with murder after 2 teenage boys were fatally stabbed in southeast London last weekend. 18-year-old Hussein Bar has been charged with murder after 2 16-year-olds were stabbed to death just a mile apart. 2 others, aged 16 and 15, appeared at Bexley Magistrates Court yesterday, charged with murder, and they were both remanded in youth custody. And in some brighter news, today marks 30 years since the first ever text message was sent. 1 in 3 people still send and receive SMS messages every day. The first text was sent by engineer Neil Papworth in December 1992, and it read, "Merry Christmas." You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus Radio. This is GB News. Now let's get back to Alastair.
Bethany, thanks very much indeed. As you just heard in Bethany's news bulletin, a 4-year-old girl's fighting for her life at Alderhay Children's Hospital in Liverpool this morning after developing Strep A. Comes after 6 primary school children have died from the bacterial infection, and health officials issued a warning to parents when it comes to spotting the symptoms. Well, to give you some help upon that, not to panic you, but to help you, I'm delighted to be joined now by one of the very best A&E doctors, Dr. Emeka Okorcha, and he is here to tell us about those signs and symptoms. I said at the top there, I wasn't joking, not to stress folk, to help folk. What should mums, dads and guardians be looking for if they fear their little one may be poorly? That was the link froze there for a moment. I'm just being told in my ear we're trying to re-establish it. Are we having any success in that?
Yeah, sorry, it keeps timing out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, sorry.
Brilliant.
Yeah, sorry about that.
How kind. Sorry it froze there, friend. I just wanted you calmly to tell mums, dads and guardians who are watching and listening what they need to look out for if they fear their little ones may be poorly.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. First of all, condolences to the families of those who've lost kids to Strep A. I've seen the articles and it's terrible. It's something we genuinely look for and fear, especially myself working in pediatric emergency. And we're just basically telling mums and dads to look out for the major signs, which are fever, a child having a sore throat, difficulty swallowing, and then having what we call petechiae or a red rash around the tongue and tonsil area and even on the skin. And it can feel a little bit like sandpaper. And this could develop 2 days after exposure, which is what we call the incubation period, when they've been exposed to Strep A from maybe another kid at school or nursery until developing symptoms. So if they feel any kind of difficulty breathing or swallowing and the child is severely unwell, they should be calling 111 and getting severe medical attention, because at this point, we don't know how many children could be affected by this severe disease. We know there's currently no vaccine. We know that this could be a result of potentially not mixing during COVID. And we'd hate to see children on life support and getting severely ill.
Yeah, and that's a really important point you just made there, what to do, because we were putting up illustrations of what you were describing, the rash, the swollen tongue, all of that stuff, which clearly looks terrifying. And an awful lot of mums and dads would think that's a 999 job. I've read all about this strep stuff and my child is now in deep, deep trouble. It is not a 999 call. It's an NHS 111 call.
I would suggest, yes, NHS 111 first and foremost, and discuss with them over the phone. They're very good at triaging what signs and symptoms your child has had and how long they've had them, and then they can guide you on whether or not you can bring your child by yourself straight into A&E. You can see one of us, one of the professionals, or to sit on it for a few days, depending on how unwell the child gets.
And what are let's end on an optimistic note. Make that phone call, talk to an expert at the other end of the line. Maybe you end up in A&E, maybe you end up having to see the GP. What are the treatments? Is it going to be antibiotic, as I read in most of the newspapers this morning? And are you, as a professional, optimistic we can crack this thing?
I'm very optimistic we can crack it. Like most seasons, we do see seasonal bugs, especially when it comes with children around this time of year. Often they tend to be viral and self-limiting diseases, and usually they can go away in a number of days or a week or so. We've seen severe chickenpox with children, which can lead to complications, and we've seen bacterial infections like Streptococcus pyogenes. Now we're seeing what we call scarlet fever, which is a Strep A infection. We can get on top of it as professionals. What we just need to make sure is that mothers and fathers and carers and guardians of children just identify the signs and get the right medical help.
Yeah, absolutely. No heroics, but do the right thing. Always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Emeka Okoro-Ocha, who is an A&E doctor, so got the badges on his sleeve, knows what he's talking about. Check out for those symptoms, the rashes, the tongue swelling, the temperature and all the rest of it, and then dial NHS 111. Do not dial 999, and you all know what the problems are with ambulances at the moment anyway, so it really wouldn't help, and it's not the right thing to do. Hope that helped you. We wanted to be calm, balanced and informative. Now, on our big subject today of education, you've overwhelmed us with your emails about private school taxation. Here's just a selection of what you've had to say. Edward carries on the conversation. We have 2 boys in private school. It's hard work to afford it and in the costs, but it is worth it. Both boys excel in totally different areas and were in the state system until 8 years ago, until they were 8 years old. 20% VAT makes it marginal. Charles says, I think Labour supporters are under mistaken belief that these schools are all Etons or Winchesters, when they're not. I'd say that 90% of UK pupils in independent schools come from middle-income homes struggling to fund the fees, all of them. And Ryan says, easy politics for Labour, even possibly the politics of envy might hinder their ability to get a majority. One of the reasons that Tony Blair stayed clear of the policy. I think I said that at the very beginning of our conversation. Now, if you missed any of it, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because you can see all of the programmes and previous ones as well, plus the really excellent interviews that I've had. I don't mean my questioning, I mean the brilliant answers I've had from a full range of people today on this subject. It is all at GB News YouTube, so do subscribe and you won't miss a thing. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends, with plenty more still to come this afternoon, including how can we keep warm this winter but on a budget? This week's Saturday Savings will explain all. That's next, but first, a quick break. We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. Clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's just inching towards 2 o'clock and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. Now it's time for this week's Saturday Savings, and goodness me, don't we need it. Doctors are said to be prescribing heating to Brits with medical conditions that worsen in the cold, while 1 in 4 are avoiding turning on the heating just to cut costs and keep within budget. Suppliers found that Brits have reduced their energy consumption by 10% since October. So just how can all of us stay warm and healthy this winter and also avoid extra on those bills? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Sate, who is the founder of the UK's leading sustainability and money-saving platform, Save Money, Cut Carbon. So you have proposals that can keep us warm, save us money and save the planet. Off you go.
I do. Good afternoon, Alastair, and thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I think there's a lot of advice for everyone to take in, and we like to break it down into kind of 3 chunks. I think the first one is around behaviour, so things you can do in the household and also in the businesses, because businesses are really struggling with this as well at the moment, around changing your behaviour. And we probably know about them, maybe not leave your TV on standby, use a little bit less water in the kettle, but there's some really interesting things you can do around actually kind of auditing your own home. So we advise, do look at the thermostat and see if you can knock that down a few degrees, but particularly also look at your boiler. What are your timings set to? Does the boiler come on at the right time when you're in the building? Look at things like fridges, freezers. Can you turn them down a little bit? Many people won't know that one of the biggest energy users in your home is your freezer because it's running all the time. Be careful not to turn it down too far to cause any damage to food, but if you can turn those things down a little bit, and even the actual temperature on your boiler. And then we recommend people actually go around their house, maybe when the heating's on, look at the radiators. Have you got radiators or heaters that are on in rooms that you're not using that room, and really start to turn them down and throttle them back? So there's a whole range of behaviour changes that can be made. And then there's some really low-cost retrofit things that you can do. So many of us will be sitting watching this programme, I'm sure, with our light bulb on. This is a standard 60-watt light bulb. To give your viewers a bit of a clue, kind of 60 watts, if it's on 5 hours a day, is going to be costing you somewhere between £25 and £30 a year to run that bulb. A very, very simple swap to an LED light bulb will save about 90% of consumption. So you're now looking, instead of £25 to run a bulb, maybe £3 or £4 to run a bulb. And the LED lights were quite expensive, but now you can buy them for a couple of pounds. One odd one that we always look at, bizarrely, is fitting maybe an eco shower head, because people don't really tie that into water. But normally when you're having a shower, you've heated that water and it's a big consumer effectively of energy. So reducing your amount of water being used in a shower is great. I think I read in the Times the other day, the government said, don't only have a shower once a week and use more deodorant. Some government official. I don't think that's the answer. I think there's lots of small things you can do around your house to make a big difference.
Certainly an improvement on the 1960s advice of during the energy crisis then, which was bath with a friend. But there we are. But the shower thing is, I have read that as well. And you find your favourite music, whether it's classical or pop, that runs to that 4-minute period. And once your favourite piece of music finishes, get out of the shower. The final point, you're an expert in this field. How close do you think we are to being able to play again the compare and contrast tariffs? Because that's another huge way of saving money, and it's long since gone. How close are we to be getting back to that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting comment. I think the meerkats are dead. We have been convinced for years and years and years that the way to save money is to keep swapping our bills around. And I totally disagree with that. I think the way to save money long term is to understand on how we reduce what we actually use in the household, because that gives long-term benefit to your budget in the home or your business. It also helps the planet, because the less energy we're using, the less water we're using, pumping around, it really helps the planet a little bit. And I think one of the upsides a little bit, if there is any upside in this energy crisis, is people have really started to look at reducing what they're using. But I think governments may be missing a trick, because we're talking about COP27 on one side and energy crisis on the other. Actually, in my view, they're totally interlinked. If we start reducing what we actually use, then we help our pockets, we help our budgets in our businesses, and we help the planet.
Terrific to end on a win-win equation there. Mark, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Mark Sate there, the founder of the UK's leading sustainability and money-saving platform, Save Money, Cut Carbon. Look it up and there'll be lots of useful tips there for you. Now, Beacon Collective, whose goal is to increase philanthropy and celebrate it and social investment in the United Kingdom, held a forum in London on Wednesday, and I was lucky enough to host a panel at that forum asking why people did philanthropy and what it actually achieved. We also asked whether charities do things better than the state, given the current cost of living crisis. Charity and philanthropy have never been more important. And I'm delighted to welcome back to the programme now to discuss all of that the co-founder of the Beacon Collaborative. There she is, Kath Dovey. Kath, great to see you at the forum and great to have you back on the programme. I loved every minute of it, but Gus O'Donnell, the former Treasury boss and Cabinet Secretary, opened proceedings saying the economy is in a mess with little sign of improvement. What the state can do will decline over the years. Rich people have got to get engaged in philanthropy or things just won't get done.
Absolutely right. And I think it was a big theme through the day that we've got to look at all the mechanisms to get money where it's needed. And, as we were talking about on the day, there is a difference between what government pays for and what private capital can pay for. And philanthropy is part of private capital.
I think also, and this is what we talked about last time you were on the programme, and I banged on about it on Wednesday as well, is I personally think there are a range of activities where philanthropy, donors, charities can do things better and more responsively than the poor old taxpayer via the state.
100%. And I mean, let's just give you a couple of examples. So we had Earthshot last night. This is all about innovation around the climate crisis. And, it's high risk capital trying to find new solutions to this problem. It's too risky for the government. It's probably too risky for the private sector. But private individuals, the Waleses or any private individual can put money into that innovation.
Yes.
You see this a lot in medical research. Before something is commercial, before an idea is commercial, someone's got to fund it. One of the reasons philanthropists fund universities is because they find ideas before those ideas are commercial. So they're trying to help, move society forward by putting some risk capital into the system. And kind of linked to that, you have advocacy. If something's not on the government's radar that should be on the government's radar, it's private capital that can say, hang on a minute, we've learned this, let's share it with you. How can we grow this together? So those are two really, really important areas. Another area that I think is really important and will be particularly as we go through this crisis is around community. And I think the best way I can describe this is with an example. So at the forum we had Barry Wells, who started Box for Kids, which is a very simple idea. Corporates and executives can donate a box. Barry and his team go out to the local hospitals. They find kids who are terminally ill, who've got life-limiting conditions, and they say, come and have a fabulous day. Come and watch your favourite sports team. Come to this fabulous event. And when they get there, they meet their heroes. There are volunteers there. Just make sure the family has a fabulous day. What could be better? Bringing communities together.
I couldn't agree with you more. I see your Barry, and I raise you Bill Holroyd, your good friend and indeed a fellow of the foundation. I was bowled over by his example. He made an absolute fortune in the food industry and in restaurants. He's ploughed a huge amount of that back into building a network of youth clubs, which, of course, the government do find it expensive to fund and local authorities don't have the money anymore to do it. And I said to him, what's your greatest achievement in life? And he said, looking at those faces in my youth clubs who are not hanging around on street corners, don't have knives down their back pocket and don't commit crime. They're safe and they're doing good stuff. I just thought that was a cause of total celebration.
Absolutely. And, youth clubs, reaching marginalised people, reaching people that the state can't reach. That's another area. Yeah. We had Peter Samuelson there from First Star. That's a charity that works with kids in care and helps them to get to universities. Of course they go to school that's funded by the state. But if you haven't got a stable family, maybe you need a bit of extra help. Yeah, and that's something that philanthropically funded charities can do.
Which takes me perfectly to my final point. We're plugging all of our mates and people who made such great speeches, but Peter Samuelson has to get a shout out. He's not only from my own industry, but I thought his speech was brilliant because at the heart of it was the idea that the era of the grand projet, building a castle, building a wonderful library or whatever it might be, that's kind of gone. It's now about supporting people. It's about supporting learning. It's about making society better and more cohesive. And the state is finding that tricky to do, and philanthropy can do it and make life for everyone better.
Absolutely. Government funds public services and does a fabulous job doing that. We obviously need more money to do that. Philanthropy finds the gaps. Not bits that government should fund, but bits that it can do in addition to what government funds, and just make sure that we reach across communities and that we don't let anyone down. And that's what it's all about. That's what the forum was about.
And it was brilliant. Thank you for inviting me, and I was honoured to take part in it. Kath, great to talk to you again. Keep in touch. Always happy to have you on the programme there, the co-founder there, Kath Dovey, of the Beacon Collaborative. And if any of what she said or I said caught your fancy, your attention, then look them up. They've got a brilliant website. They tell you who's involved and what they try to do. That's Beacon, B-E-A-C-O-N, Collaborative. It's just a brilliant thing. Finally, we've got time for a few more of your thoughts, I'm pleased to say, on our main discussion today about the taxation of private schools and Keir Starmer's proposals to abolish it. Sarah says, worse, they will be classed as the ones who couldn't pay the fees when they turn up at their new state school. Kids can be cruel, and they therefore may get it from both sectors. If Labour want VAT on educational fees, will that be VAT on university fees as well, adult education classes, etc.? Or are they just aiming their spite and envy, not my words, your words, at those that they claim are privileged? Natalie says, what about those already in the state system that will have the knock-on effect of an immediate influx of new kids? We talked about that, and all of my guests said that is a real problem that needs perhaps further examination. Diana joins the debate saying, I would give every child the opportunity to go to a private school by offering the parents vouchers. The return of vouchers to Keith Joseph. They redeem at whatever school they choose. Let the schools compete for kids, not the other way around. How interesting. These are great, great comments. Thank you so much. Jamie, also, can you imagine being that teen happily settled in your school, knowing that at a term's notice you might just have to attend the local comprehensive? Kids can be cruel, we all know it, but to move from a private school to a comprehensive, as my eldest had to do, can be very, very tricky. Finally, Edward says, and I think speaks for very many of you who've been kind enough to send your thoughts in, Edward says, we have 2 boys in private schools. It's hard work to afford it and to meet those costs, but it really is worth it. Both boys excel in totally different areas and were in the state system until they were 8 years old. 20% VAT makes it a marginal decision. Charles, I think Labour supporters are under a mistaken belief that these schools are all Eatons or Winchester. We've read that one out already. Final word to Ryan. Easy politics for Labour, even if the politics of envy. It might hinder their ability to get a majority. One reason perhaps why... No, we've read that one out as well. We're repeating these. So I'm going to draw a line there at 5 minutes past the top of the hour. I will be back here again tomorrow at noon. I hope very much indeed that you can join us then. Meantime, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking cloudy for many with a chilly breeze for some. Let's take a look at the details. The Northern Isles will see this breeze, though it will stay calmer for mainland Scotland. Rain and drizzle will linger across northwest Scotland, with skies remaining grey throughout today. The drizzle may fringe into the far west of Northern Ireland, while a few showers are possible along eastern coastlines during the afternoon. Northwest England has the best chance of seeing some sunny spells this afternoon, and it will remain predominantly dry with highs of around 7 degrees Celsius. A few sunny spells are also possible across Wales, particularly in the far west, but variable amounts of cloud will make for a duller day at times in the east. Cloudier skies will originate from eastern England, where there'll also be some scattered showers. The showers will mainly affect coastal areas, but could push across Lincolnshire into the Midlands. A northeasterly breeze across England and Wales will make it feel chilly this afternoon. Coasts of East Anglia will be particularly exposed to this, making it feel like a low single figures. The breeze will also be present across southern England. It will again be a mostly dry and cloudy day here, though southern counties could largely escape from the showers. Showers will continue across eastern areas into this evening. Meanwhile, the rain across northwest Scotland will gradually clear off. And that's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello, it's 2 p.m. That means it's time for Real Britain with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, radio and online. Now, we've got a lot to get stuck into this afternoon. First, strikes and more strikes. Health workers, firefighters, teachers, lecturers, civil servants, transport, postal and security workers are all threatening further strike action. There's talk of the army even being drafted in to help keep emergency services running. Is that right? Then, as top Tory Sajid Javid announces he'll stand down at the next election, I'll be asking, do the Tories deserve to survive? And one woman has claimed that the ban on alcohol at the Qatar World Cup has made it safer for women to enjoy the game. Should Britain follow suit? I'm not so sure. Let me know what you think, but first, let's get the latest news headlines with Bethany. Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. I'm Bethany Elsey, bringing you up to date from the GB newsroom. Parents are being urged to be vigilant and look out for symptoms of Strep A after 6 children under the age of 10 have died from the infection in the UK. Symptoms are usually mild, but the UK Health Security Agency is now investigating the rise in severe cases. Experts say that a lack of mixing during the COVID-19 pandemic could be behind a drop in immunity. Well, bacteriologist at the University of Aberdeen, Hugh Pennington, says spotting it early is key.
Because the disease, this severe manifestation of the disease, is so relatively rare, many doctors won't have seen a case, and they may not have that high index of suspicion. The good news is that treatment is straightforward with penicillin. This is not a bug that's developed antibiotic resistance like so many other bacteria. It's still sensitive to penicillin. The whole issue really is, can you get the penicillin in there quickly enough?
Well, NHS GP Dr Veena Babu told GB News the symptoms that parents should look out for.
Strep A presents the most commonly in 3 ways. You can get a sore throat, you can get scarlet fever, or you could get a condition called impetigo. So scarlet fever presents as muscle aches, fever. You may get a rash on the skin, which feels what we call your typical sandpaper rash. So you might get some bumps coming up on the skin, and that could be on the arms, on the chest, or on the tummy. I would advise parents, what we were saying, look, feel, and how your kids are feeding.
A wealthy Russian businessman has been arrested on suspicion of money laundering, conspiracy to defraud the Home Office and conspiracy to commit perjury. The 58-year-old was arrested at his multi-million-pound home in London by a specialist police unit investigating crime by oligarchs. 2 other men were also arrested in connection with the money laundering. All 3 have since been released on bail. In a tweet responding to the arrests,